difference. It reminds me of certain people who told me, and I can't relate to this because it wasn't true in my case, but there were certain people who told me that the first time they smoked marijuana, they didn't get high. and I was told by other people that they did get high, but they didn't know what it was. They didn't recognize it. They weren't acclimated to recognizing what happened. And it takes a few times for some people before they recognize, whoa, I'm high. That's what's happening here. And I actually think that's true of transmission. I think that, or at least it can be true of transmission. That for some of us, sometimes we actually have it. I think in my case, that was true, because I was around certain people who were in the vicinity of powerful beings, and I was doing all kinds of other things. I was holding my breath, I was shaking, I was dancing, I was meditating, I was doing a bunch of things with these folks. And I went through great changes, and I thought it was because I was doing all the techniques. And I think that was part of it, but I also think it was transmission, but I wasn't aware of that. When I became aware of it is when I went to see this teacher, Ken Lloyd Russell, who in New York in 1984. And I had already been doing spiritual practices and everything for years, but I went to see him just to see a therapist. He was a therapist. He was also a spiritual teacher, but he was trained in Gestalt therapy. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have some therapy with this guy. And all of a sudden, it was like somebody put some psychedelic in my tea or something. I was just sitting like, what is happening? This is strange. And I started telling him, like, I said, there's energy coming off of you. What's going on? And I could feel myself changing with it. It was visual, but it was also kinesthetic. I could feel my voice was going deeper. I was breathing differently. I was feeling much more mellow. My sense of myself was more expanded. And I said, there's energy coming off of you. And he said, just ignore it. Energy is just like the couch or the chair. It's just an object. And I tried to ignore it, and it got more and more powerful until I said to him, everybody might have heard this story already, but I'll tell it again. I said to him, what is happening? This, there's something's happening. There's some energy coming off. And I just was like, are you enlightened? And he said, listen to that question. Are you enlightened? How would you know? I said, if I said yes, you wouldn't know whether I was enlightened or not. Maybe I'm lying. Or maybe I think I'm enlightened and I'm not. Or maybe I think it's important, or I could say no, because I am enlightened and I think it's important for you not to know I am. So I say no. You still wouldn't know. He said, the important thing is not whether I say I'm enlightened or not, or even whether I'm enlightened. The important thing is whether you're getting something by being here. Are you being affected? Is this transforming you? If you're receiving something here, if something is transforming in you, then that's a reason for you to be here. And he said, that's true whether I'm enlightened or not. And then he said, even if I'm the Buddha himself, if you're not becoming transformed, if there's nothing happening for you here, then you shouldn't be here. And that was so important to me. It totally reversed what I was looking for, what direction I was looking in. so much about what I thought spiritual life was about changed in that moment. That radical truthfulness, honesty. And it also shaped the way that I understood, or helped to shape the way I understood what transmission is and what it isn't. Because he wasn't saying, see, there's the proof. Obviously, I'm enlightened because you're experiencing all this energy. He didn't say that at all. He's just like, if something is happening for you, if this is changing you, then by all means, then use me. But it doesn't have there's no claim involved there of enlightenment or not, of having reached the ultimate anything, or of having the capacity to know that. It isn't really something that you yourself can confirm. So transmission is, you have some kind of transmission happening, but what that means ultimately in terms of full awakening or clarity or whatever, that doesn't go along with it. So it helped me to both appreciate that what I'm getting from somebody sometimes is transmission, which is valuable in itself, which is great or can be great. And also to appreciate that it doesn't confer validity to the person who is doing the transmitting necessarily. It doesn't mean that they have all the answers. It doesn't mean that they are perfect or perfectly enlightened. It simply means that you feel transmission in their presence. That's it. And in some ways, that's like love too, right? People have connections to people and feel love. And that doesn't mean that they're a great person. It just means they are for you. Maybe they do it for you, but they might not do it for somebody else too. But it did seem to be like a crack in reality for me the first time, for sure, because it didn't make any sense from a scientific materialist point of view what was happening. It was like, what, where does this fit in? How could this be? It got even stranger when I started doing phone sessions with him, because the transmission would still happen and he was not in the room. So then it got very weird. I mean, just like it does now. I mean, now it's a common occurrence for people to experience transmission from video. And obviously people are not sitting physically in the same room. So there's some way in which transmission, energetic transmission, transcends space, physical space. It does seem that it is amplified in physical space, but not always. There seems to be some kind of equation, with an X and a Y kind of thing. Like, there are other factors that make it possible to feel strong transmission other than physical presence. Although it is a factor. And it may have something to do with trust, connection, all these other things, which will amplify it even if you're physically not in the presence. So it may be that if you're in the physical presence, you don't need as much trust, because in the physical presence, there's a kind of transmission of energy that happens that is harder to tune in to at a distance unless you're open. But I don't know. I think there's many factors. So I'm speaking dualistically. I'm speaking as though there is space. I don't think that's actually the way it is ultimately. I don't actually think that people receive transmission from each other. I think that's a useful way of speaking, and it is true in a relative sense, and so it follows certain rules because relative reality has certain rules. Dualistic reality has certain rules, or like laws of nature kind of thing. There's actually some rules. But I actually don't think that we're receiving transmission from anyone else. It's something like being itself is connecting, reconnecting with being itself, using the appearance of so-called other objects and people. So it's your own being engulfing you in presence, using the appearance of teachers, places, things. I mean, even time is an illusion. You most certainly can watch a video of a satsang that happened 20 years ago and feel the transmission as though you're in the presence of a teacher now. And for thousands of years, people have done this with images, with sculpted images, with painted images. And in the last 100 years, people have done it quite a bit with pictures, photographs of teachers. You sit with a photograph of Ramana Maharshi or of Sri Ramakrishna or Nanda Maima. You will feel their transmission. Their transmission is a flavor of your transmission. And I say you, not meaning your ego, but of your own being, of your own energetic nature in its fullness. Another way of saying that same thing is that it's all God. That God's presence, or the goddess, if you want to use that way of speaking about the energies of God, that the energies of God are the goddess, or the power of God, or the power of the unmanifest is the goddess. And the goddess is the only one who is in relationship to you, giving her transmission to you using many disguises, many puppets, many appearances. This is why last satsang, I think I said something about transmission being a personness. The word person's a little weird. It's like, this has been struggled with in the past. I mean, I like to say it's personness, because the only reason is to say that is because the goddess, or the energies of God, or the energies of the unmanifest that we are in relationship with, are full of all the qualities that we hold precious and dear. I mean, in all honesty, so much of wanting to be in transmission is because it feels good. It feels blissful. It feels open. And doesn't it feel good to be in the presence of a loving, radiant heart that never will turn away from you, that is always radiating in your presence and wanting to connect in love with you? That's the goddess. The goddess is, like this word energy, it sounds very impersonal in a kind of materialistic way, like as if it's a thing, energy, like electricity. Oh, I'm feeling the electricity. Yeah, you're feeling the electricity, but it's like the electricity of when you fall in love, like the juice, and then it's okay that we do this. The metaphor then also is the sexual metaphor, right? Oh, it's the, and so there's a whole tantric thing and all that. That's all good, but it still keeps it like, it still objectifies it in some way. It's like the stuff that gets you off. But it's so much more than that. It's, it's the love, the feeling of presence, of otherness that is not scary, but is quite the opposite, is loving. Although it can be scary too. It is awe-inspiring. It's larger than us. So in that sense, it can be scary if we're in resistance to it. And it's definitely demand. Demand is not the right word, but it's something like demand. It commands respect. The same way that if somebody absolutely loved you and saved you and protected you and was there for you, that would command respect in you for them, as well as love and admiration and devotion. So that's why I say person. It's actually personness. That's a better word, I think. It's fullness. And this is why, despite the bending over, I was going to say bending over backwards, or you could say despite the bending over backwards of the keeping of non-theistic language in Buddhism, they just couldn't help themselves. They had to personify this. They have to have, Amitabha. They have to have Vajrasattva. They have to have Samantabhadra. They have to. Because even though there is no actual self as a fixation in any of it, neither in us either, or anyone we love, or anyone that we've ever felt any comfort from, or love for, or comfort from, like someone who's really been there for us. And when we come home, and when we've invited them and they come to be in our home, we feel safe and happy and at home. Even then, there's no self there in a kind of a fixation. Ultimately, there's no self in anything. There's no self in anyone. But the presence of love and fullness, of complete enjoyment, that it happens in the deepest relationship, that is the nature of Sambhogakaya, the dimension of complete enjoyment, which is always personified. It's always some kind of a Buddha, whether male or female, or sometimes an apparent being that might even look like an animal with many heads and many arms, but somehow you get that there's a being there, that there's intelligence there, that there's presence there. Not just presence of electricity, but of heart. So for me, transmission is about that ultimate transmitter, being in relationship with that ultimate transmitter and recognizing that ultimate transmitter as being your own heart, inseparable from your own perception, your own mind, your own being itself. So I know last call we had that thing about person and all that. So I wanted to really clarify what I meant by that. Maybe you could say heart. But again, not just as a pumping organ, but as everything that you hold precious in another being. And we do hold other beings as precious, other humans as precious. So it's that times infinity.